Anatomy, a Love Story is a historical, gothic novel by LA-based TV writer Dana Schwartz, who has here turned her attention to the Edinburgh of 1817. Anatomy is a novel that is having fun with its genre. It is a novel that fully understands the Gothic, it understands the period in which the Gothic rose to prominence, and it has fun within that world. And given the fact that A Love Story is its subtitle, I couldn't help but think of the fact that this is basically what if Frankenstein was a romance? Given the fact that Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is my favourite novel of all time, I was pretty excited by that. Anatomy tells the story of Hazel Sinnott. She is the daughter of a very wealthy family based in Edinburgh. Her father has gone off with the Navy to do something to do with Napoleon. Napoleon's been captured, and I think he's doing some kind of security detail for Napoleon. Anyway, he's out of the picture. And her mother is in mourning, deep, deep in mourning, because Hazel's older brother succumbed to and died of a plague that ravaged Edinburgh 2 years before the beginning of this novel. This means that Hazel's mother, wrapped in dark clothes, is just a hollow shell who is paying no real attention to the children that she has left. She has no energy. She has no life left in her. And we follow Hazel, who is in her late teens and is desperate to become a physician. The plague that took Hazel's brother is central to the story of Anatomy, and it's not something I'd ever heard of, so I thought, oh okay, I'll give it a quick Google and see if it actually existed. And it seems like it didn't. When I Googled it, all that came up was an Edith Wharton short story that I've never read. The plague is called the Roman fever, and it's called that because one of the symptoms is a bunch of boils that sprout on your back and eventually burst and look like stab wounds, and so it was named for the events of Julius Caesar. Pretty creative and disgustingly visceral in its imagery. And since this is a love story, we have a second protagonist, a guy called Jack Currer. Jack is the opposite of Hazel in almost every single way. He's a poor man who lives in the slums. He works part-time during the day at a theatre, but the theatre is probably going to get shut down again because people are starting to think that the fever is back. And at night, Jack works as a resurrection man, which is code for a kind of gravedigger, but not someone who steals valuables that were buried with a body, but rather the body itself. They take the body and then they sell it to a university or a doctor or science in general to do with as they like. For the first quarter-ish of the novel, we follow Hazel as she tries to find a way to become a physician, to join a university class and learn doctoring. But it doesn't go well. She even tries to disguise herself as a boy wearing her dead brother's clothes. And it doesn't go as she plans. This leads Hazel, as the blurb says, to seek out other options. She's so desperate to be the country's first female physician that she'll do anything. And so when she meets Jack, she goes, oh hang on, this guy digs up bodies. Okay, I have lots of money, I've got lots of time, I'm going to pay him, and he's going to bring bodies to my lab that I've just built out of my castle's dungeon that I have. It's perfect. It's wonderfully camp and gothic. I love it. So her home has a dungeon, sure, a disused one, and she just sort of renovates that into a kind of makeshift lab. Jack brings her bodies and she examines them. She uses them to study. She's got books, she's got bodies, and she's going to study them. But she also eventually wants to try to work on living people, help people, cure people, treat people. But at the beginning, dead bodies. But because Hazel is wealthy and comes from a very well-to-do family, she's also been basically engaged to this other guy, this other rich guy, since she was born. And so the two of them have kind of been courting forever. So that's the first spanner in the works when it comes to this love story. Anatomy is pretty short, around 300 pages, normal novel length, but so much happens in it, and it's dealing with so many different themes and ideas. I would call it an explicitly feminist novel, because it's dealing with female progress at a time when patriarchy was at its peak. Hazel wants to be a physician, and all the men around her are telling her that women are just not smart enough, not capable enough, too emotional, all of the stuff that you've heard all your life. But then there's also an obvious element of classism here as well. Jack is a very, very poor boy. He comes from nothing, and he literally gets his hands dirty digging up graves and pulling potentially diseased bodies out of the earth. And you know he's going to fall in love with this very well-to-do rich girl who also is not afraid to get her hands dirty, play around with these bodies, which again are potentially diseased, and do whatever she can to get what she wants. So these are two very commendable, respectable people in their own way, and they're going to fall in love. But this is also a murder mystery story, because Jack's in a very dangerous business. All of the resurrection men in Edinburgh, and there's a surprising amount of them digging up graves, they're going missing. They're turning up dead. Someone is killing off resurrection men, or at least kidnapping them for some reason. Jack has a friend who goes missing. Another friend where something really horrible happens to him. There's a lot of gore, grotesquerie, disgusting elements to this novel. It's gothic, and it loves being gothic. So what's going on here? Who is targeting resurrection men and why? Why them? Now, I was recommended this book by Andy, a friend and patron during one of my Patreon book clubs, and Andy called it YA, and I can definitely see why. Now, I found it in the non-YA fiction section of my local bookshop, and I think it's something that straddles that line between YA fiction and regular adult fiction. I don't like saying adult fiction, makes it sound like it's porn. It's not porn. And I think it straddles that line because it feels very YA in the sense that it's an almost cliched romance in amongst really gross stuff going on. It's maturely gothic in the sense that it has so many great gothic themes going on that feel at home alongside things like Frankenstein or Wuthering Heights. But the romance does feel kind of childish, but in a nice way, in a sweet fairy tale way. And also, it's pretty predictable. It's pretty obvious who's doing what to whom and why, who the secret villain is, what twists are going to come up. You can see it all coming, at least I did. I knew exactly what was going on right from the beginning. And so that makes it feel kind of YA, kind of like baby's first murder mystery. But I don't mean to say that to patronize the book or detract from reading the book. It's wonderful. I loved this book so much. Right from the moment I saw it, I mean, look at this cover. Just look at it. It's amazing. And Anatomy is just something that really revels in grotesquerie. It is disgusting. There are so many dead bodies here, so much disease, so much murder, people going missing, having their limbs cut off, being experimented on. Hazel is dealing with dead bodies. They talk a lot about disease and mutilation. It's gross. There's a lot of body ickiness going on, and I revel in all of that. But the romance feels, as I said, kind of childish, kind of sweet. That blend of the gothic and the almost cliched romantic really makes this book stand on its own and not really feel like anything else I've read. You can sort of cover one eye and see the romance and go, "Aw," and then you can cover the other eye, see all the blood and guts and gore and dead bodies and go, "Ugh." And putting those two things together actually takes a lot of confidence and skill, and Dana Schwartz nails it. Absolutely nails it. With themes of feminism and class disparity, this is a book that very much speaks to me as an angry feminist who gets on her high horse a lot about class disparity. The romance speaks to my romantic bones, and I do have quite a few of them. And the gothic, well, gothic is probably my favourite genre. As I said, Frankenstein is my favourite novel, and the references to Frankenstein within this are very on the nose. This is almost a gothic parody at points. It's a modern novel set at the exact moment that Frankenstein was being written and published. It's a novel that certainly understands the legacy of Frankenstein, and with all of the digging up of dead bodies, and all of the mysteries and confusion surrounding what is possible when it comes to life, and also the fact that our protagonist is a woman who is cursed by death. She lost her brother to a plague that may be coming back and continuing to ravage her local society. And then you've got Dr. Beecham, the man who she hopes is going to be her teacher, a man who eventually makes a bet with her about whether or not she can become a doctor without his lectures. Very interesting guy. And Dr. Beecham is the grandson of a man who made incredible strides when it came to medicine and understanding anatomy. He's carrying on his grandfather's legacy. He is the best doctor in Britain right now. He's a man who sees potential in Hazel, even though he cannot teach her. And he's a man who is doing amazing things with medicine. He invents some kind of chloroform or anesthetic. This happens very, very early in the novel. Hazel goes to watch one of his lectures / medical performances, as they used to do in the Victorian period. You've probably seen clips of it or seen it in other novels, movies, video games, whatever. A doctor performing on a patient in front of an audience of people in a kind of theatre, hence why we call them operating theatres. And he unveils this incredible anesthetic that he's created, this chloroform that he uses to cover someone's mouth. They breathe something in, and off they go to dreamland. Medicine, bodies, anatomy, these are key things in this novel, and you do wonder if anything science fiction or supernatural is going to occur. All the way through the book, it feels like a possibility. Much like with Frankenstein, the man stitches together a bunch of body parts and brings a thing to life. And you go, okay, well, when is something like that going to happen here? Because the plague in the novel is made up for it. The doctors and the medicine that they're working with, it's all made up as well. What potentially is going to happen here? Is there anything supernatural? Are we going to verge into science fiction territories? You kind of hope so. And then, as I said, there is a murder mystery at play. There's so much going on here. A feminist, politics-infused, murder mystery, romantic, gothic novel. Brilliant. And it all works. It all works brilliantly. Anatomy is Frankenstein but romance, and I loved it to bits. Now it's time for my Patreon book recommendation of the week. This recommendation comes from Rachel, and she says, my recommendation is How to Get a Girlfriend When You're a Terrifying Monster by Marie Cardno. I love the tagline on the back of the book, life is tough when you're an eldritch abomination. This is a sapphic fantasy romance between a human witch and a monster girl. Trillin is part of the being known as Endless, but she has broken away and formed her own identity. As she is wandering around her world, she comes across Siam, who is there to study and explore Trillin's world. They develop a crush on each other, but the Endless wants Trillin back, so they escape to Siam's human world. But when they get there, Siam is unable to look at Trillin without screaming in terror. That, plus the Endless being determined to reabsorb Trillin, are obstacles that she and Siam need to overcome so they can be together. It is a fun, sweet, and fast-paced novella with a satisfying ending. Jesus, that sounds great. Thank you, Rachel. Oh my god, yes. Yeah, I'll see if I can get my hands on this. That sounds fantastic. Thank you. That's also a really suitable recommendation for this video in particular. And if you want to recommend me books, join my Patreon. I'll read out your recommendations as well. Check out Anatomy and subscribe for books.